have such a large group of people actually on Zoom here. So I shall start. This product, early Arabic books, printed books from the British Library, is a digitization of all the works listed in Ellis's catalogue of Arabic printed books in the British Museum. That is all Arabic texts in the British Museum by around 1890. The collection covers a wide range of subjects, and in particular, the heritage of Arabic works in Arabic, European translations of Arabic works, and Arabic translations of Christian works. It therefore records a long exchange of ideas and learning between Europe and the Arabic-speaking world over 400 years. It also, coincidentally, enables people who don't have Arabic to read Arabic works in English or Latin or Hebrew or French. So why this collection? The British Library houses one of the world's major collection of Arabic materials. Their printed book collection is particularly strong on early Arabic printing and books printed in Europe, as well as Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and India. The collection is built from printing and collecting in Europe, in Britain and Europe from the 16th century onwards, as well as early printing in the 19th century in the Middle East and India. Technically, one expects all digitizations of English, French, German books, etc., to be fully text searchable. So Gale developed OCR software so that these texts are searchable, as well as the metadata. The product is arranged, The product is arranged in 4 modules: science, history, and geography, which is one you have. There's also religion and law, that's Islamic, Christianity, Judaism, and other faiths, and literature, language, encyclopedia, and periodicals. So in this presentation, I'll be concentrating on the science, history, and geography module. Starting with medicine, the largest group of scientific texts are the over 300 works on medicine and physiognomy. There are also 90 works on astronomy and astrology, 74 on mathematics, 53 on alchemy, and over 500 on philosophy and ethics. Medicine was a field in which Arab physicians excelled. The Prophet Muhammad stated, "For every disease there is a remedy," and Arab physicians sought out new remedies and methods of diagnosis, traveling great distances in search of plants and remedies and learning all they could from their predecessors in ancient Greece: Hippocrates, Aristotle, Dioscorides, and Galen. The earliest medical works in Arabic were translations of ancient Greek works. Hunayn ibn Ishaq al-Ibadi was one of the most important translators. He was a Christian Arab who spoke 4 languages and specialized in optometry. His introduction, or isagoga, to his collection of medical tracts, the Ars Medicinae Articella, was so important that it was adopted as the basis for the medical curriculum in European universities. The edition on the screen is the Latin version printed in Venice in around 1515. Tonto al-Razi is one of the more famous Arab writers on medicine. His best known book is the study of smallpox and measles, Al-Jadawi wa al-Hasba. His manual or commonplace book on medicine, Al-Hawi fil al-Tib, which is this one, was translated into Latin in 1279 by Faraj ben Salim, a physician of Sicilian Jewish origin, employed by Charles of Anjou, and subsequently became known in Europe. He also wrote a book on surgery al-Mansouri fi al-Tib. Now, I just want to break there and go into the product. To answer the question, how, now I've described those authors, how do you find these works? So thinking about Al-Razi, I'm now in advanced search. If you select the author creator search index and start typing Razi, whoops, I'm going to refresh this. It's been sitting here for a bit. Start again. Okay. Author creator search index. Start typing in Razi. You get some type ahead suggestions of author names. This is particularly important in this product because there's so many different variations for the spelling, especially the transliterated version of Arabic names. So you can find it here. You can also type in using the keyboard the Arabic in the Arabic key letters, but I'll put it in like this at the moment. Okay, so we have, just need to, yeah. So now we have 58 items in our results list. And if we go down to authors, you can see Al-Razi has 58 works here. And these are some of the authors and commentators and co-authors here. There are also the languages, Latin, English, Arabic, and French, and subjects. So say we're looking at smallpox. We can select these versions. We have 15 on smallpox, covering the subject of smallpox. 2 of these are in Arabic, so let's look at those. There's one here of 1766 and one of 1872. 1766 version is actually bilingual. Here you've got, on the side here, you've got an electronic table of contents, so you can work through the book here, or you can go page by page at the top. So this is the title page of Al-Razi, work in Latin and Arabic, translated by Johannes Channing. The second one is from 1872. And it's a work all in Arabic. And it includes the prefatory notice of the author extracted from the chronicle of Abu al-Faraj Bar-Hebraeus. So you can find that at the end. I think that should be here in Arabic. There. So let's go back and remove the limiter to Arabic and look at the other results we had. We sort them by date order. The first printed version here we have is from 1747. So this is a work on smallpox and measles by Richard Mead, who was an English physician who wrote on diseases. But he also included the work by Al-Razi. Which is quite interesting. It's just showing how important Al-Razi's text was, that even when English physicians, and as you'll see, French physicians were doing their own research, they would also include a copy, a translation or original of Al-Razi's work. The second one is a version in English, again, of Richard Mead's work, but including Al-Razi's text on smallpox and measles. Right, and then following that, so we were in 1748, 1762, there's edition of Richard Mead's works in one volume, which also includes the text of Al-Razi. Then he was obviously quite popular because his work was republished in 3 volumes in 1763, including Al-Razi's text. And then in 1765, another edition in 3 volumes, including Al-Razi's text. 1766 is the version that we looked at earlier. In the bilingual edition in Arabic and Latin. So if I show you the full page, that's the Latin and on the right-hand side, and then the Arabic on the left-hand side, and this runs all the way through the book. The next one, sorry, trying to scroll down, come on. Next is a version, translation into French in 2 volumes by Jean-Jacques Paulet. He actually translated into French from the bilingual Latin-Arabic edition of 1766. So you can see all these different scholars in the Arabic translation world work from each other's texts. Then there's an edition of 1781, again in Latin, and by Channing. And then finally, one in English from moving to the 19th century now, in 1848. This one is by William Alexander Greenhill, who translated it. He was an English doctor involved in public health, who happened to be interested in Arabic and medicine in Arabic, and arranged a translation of this. And the final one is one in Arabic, the 1872 one we looked at originally. So that's looking at Al-Razi on smallpox. But say you're interested in smallpox and Arabic work on that subject, just to continue this theme, there are 2 other ways you can find them. One is using the library.
Julia, can I ask one question in between?
Yes, yes.
It was about downloading the entire book, and that it's not possible to, or like it gives problems, technical problems, like trying to download an entire book. Is that do you know if that's something that happens often, or is it because it's the entire book and not just like pages of the book?
You can download the entire book.
You can,
if
right?
It does, yeah. It will depend on your bandwidth, I think, how successful it is or how quickly it does it.
Okay.
I would recommend if it's a very large book and you're having trouble, then break it up into sections.
Okay.
Because it downloads it as a PDF, and then you can either keep it as separate PDFs or join the PDFs together.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
You're welcome. It's a good question. So I'm just looking for smallpox here. There's so many subjects that we are just going past there. I mean, you might want to add in diseases as well, depending on what you're researching. But you can call up the subject, and here we've got 17, which includes many of the ones we've already looked at, but a few more. And then the other way is to search for it. So I'm going to search through the entire document. So if I type in Judari, this is searching across the entire corpus, not just the module of science, history and geography. So the 349 is probably more than you will get on your module, but most of them should be in your module, given the subject we've just been searching on. So here you can see a list of works. If we take the Arabic work, I'm just waiting for it to open. Now here, before we were looking at the table of contents earlier, just above is the results for your search term. So you can see there. There. And again, and I think this one. Yeah, there are two here. I just word of warning, the green boxes are not always totally accurate, because the company we were working with to create the OCR weren't so proficient at, well, not so experienced at working on OCR and doing all the putting in all the coordinates for get the boxes exactly on the word. So it's a bit more approximate, so those are two other ways you can actually go and find works. Now I'm going to, unless anyone's got any questions, I'm going to go back to my walk through the module. So we also have works by Ibsina, who is actually referred to as Avicenna in this product, which I'll have changed because you should be able to get him by his Arabic name as well. But he's been described as the most clear-thinking physician-philosopher. His study of symptoms was a great advance. He was the first physician to describe meningitis properly. He also noted the interdependence of mental and physical factors. His most important work is the Al-Qanun fi al-Tib, or Canon of Medicine, which became the standard medical textbook in the Islamic world and Europe until the 18th century. And this is his other medical work, the Al-Ujuzura al-Sinaiya. Astronomy was a very active field for Muslim scientists, and there are over 90 works here. The scientists assimilated earlier Greek, Hellenistic, and Indian mathematical astronomy, which they translated, wrote commentaries on, and then developed further. The Arabic translations preserved earlier texts which would have been lost. Many were subsequently translated into Latin, such as the compilation here, which includes Ptolemy's Planispherium, or Study of the Celestial Plane. Al-Faghani was a famous astronomer of the 9th century who worked in Baghdad at the House of Wisdom with other scientists on the calculation of the diameter of the Earth. He wrote a treatise on the astrolabe. His Compendium of Science of the Stars was a summary of Ptolemy's Almagest with later Arabic findings. It was translated into Latin in the 12th century by Johannes Hispaniensis of the Toledo school. In the 17th century, the Dutch Orientalist Jacob Golius published a new Arabic edition with a Latin translation and extensive notes, which is shown here. Al-Sufi's most famous and influential work was the Book of Constellations. It was written around 984 in Arabic. It aimed to incorporate both Ptolemy's Almagest with Arabic lunar mansions and included lists of stellar coordinates and illustrations from the Hellenic tradition. This French translation was made by the 19th century Danish astronomer Hans Schjelderup from the manuscript in the Royal Library Copenhagen dated 1601, which itself was a copy of the manuscript of 1013 made directly from the work of Al-Sufi. And it was also made from another manuscript in St. Petersburg. So this is a plate from that volume of constellations from the manuscript in Copenhagen. And this is a plate of the constellations from manuscript in the St. Petersburg library. Now this is an interesting table. Schjelderup includes this table in his volume, which shows variations of observations between Ptolemy, you can see, this is in French, so it's Ptolemy, Al-Sufi, and Argelander, who was a 19th century German astronomer. And looking through these sets of recordings, it's remarkable how much in line they are between the three scientists across all those centuries. Moving to optics, Al-Haytham was an astronomer, mathematician, and physician. And his Kitab al-Manathir, or Book of Optics, was translated into Latin at the turn of the 12th or 13th century and printed in Latin in 1572 by the German mathematician Friedrich Riesner, which is shown here. Also, there is a 1882, there's some plates inside the Riesner edition. There was also an 1882 bilingual Arabic and German edition of his Book of Light, and a plate inside. Haytham was also important for experimental methods of inquiry, discovery of spherical aberration, solving mathematical problems relating to correct explanation of atmospheric refraction, and the use of camera obscura for observation of a solar eclipse. Now let's move to history. History was one of the most prolific fields of Arabic writing. The collection includes 400 different historical works, as well as over 200 histories in biographical form. They include chronicles and annals, histories of rulers and dynasties, local cultural and political histories, and historical encyclopedia. So lots to research with. One of the earliest and most important biographical histories is the Kitab al-Tabakat al-Kabir of Ibn Sa'd. This selection contains an account of the messages sent by the Prophet Muhammad to different kings and princes, inviting them to embrace Islam, followed by a series of notices on the conversion of various Arab tribes and families, and a short account of the author. Al-Tabari was a Persian historian and polymath whose most important history was the Tariq al-Rusul wal al-Muluk, or History of Prophets and Kings. He followed the traditionalist method in collecting pieces of evidence or documentation on each event before writing and creating a monumental corpus of history of the Abbasid period from the 2nd to the 8th century. This edition is a bilingual German-Arabic edition by the German 19th century Orientalist Johann Gottfried Ludwig Kusegarten. Moving to Ibn Khaldun, he was a philosopher, social and economic historian. He wrote an extensive history of the Kitab al-Ibar, or Book of Lessons, records of beginnings and events in the history of the Arabs and Berbers and their powerful contemporaries. It started as history of the Berbers, which Ibn Khaldun had personal knowledge, but developed into a universal history. Book 1, the introduction, known as the Muqaddimah, is often printed separately. In it, he discusses historiography, civilization, the state, the political economy, science, societies, grammar, poetry, and culture. Here's a copy of the Muqaddimah and an interior page. Now, there are also, amongst many other works of histories, sources for the study of the Crusades, and here are some contemporary sources. Work on Saladin, bilingual. There are further sources for research on the Crusades, many in French, as you can see here. So moving now to geography, travel and cosmography, there are 168 works and translations of geography, topography and cosmography, and 58 on travel. They include factual and mirabilia type works, as well as travelogues. An important factual work is the Kitab Roger by Ibn Muhammad al-Idrisi, who was a Muslim geographer, cartographer, and Egyptologist who lived in Palermo at the court of Roger II of Sicily. The main focus for him was the detailed map presenting the world as a sphere. It was accompanied by 70 longitudinal section maps and a descriptive and valuable physical, cultural, and political description of each region, for which he gathered information from contemporary merchants, explorers, and others. The 1592 Latin edition here is the first translation. This is the, on screen is the 1836 to 40 edition translated by Joubert. And here, also from the Joubert volume, is one of the maps taken from one of the an original Arabic manuscript. This one's called the Tableau de la deuxième section de premier climat. Turning to geography, and al-Masudi, who was born in Baghdad and traveled widely through Persia, Arabia, Syria, Armenia, India, and the East, and also East Africa. Sorry, just to admit somebody else. Okay. He also sailed around the Mediterranean, Caspian, and Red Seas. He wrote a major work, which is called The Meadows of Gold and Mines of Gems, which is both geographical and historical, and which has been copied, translated, and printed extensively. Cosmography is a science that maps the general features of the cosmos or universe, describing both heaven and earth. Al-Qazwini was a physician, astronomer, and geographer and writer. His very popular book with the English title is The Marvelous Things of Creation and Wondrous Things of Existence, is one of the earliest works on cosmography. And here are two plates of illustrations from the 1848 version. Traveller's Tales. The first here, the Ajaib al-Hind, is a collection of fantastical sets of stories by Buzurg ibn Shahriar, a 10th century Persian seaman. The second one records famous travels of the 14th century Moroccan Ibn Battuta, describing his journey from Tangiers, Grenada, Fez, the Sahara, to India, Ceylon, East Indies, East Africa, China, as the envoy of the Sultan of Delhi. And then the last one here is Biruni's India. Biruni was a scientist, mathematician, and astronomer, but he also wrote widely, such as this account of religion, philosophy, literature, chronology, astronomy, customs, laws, and astrology of India around 1030. And here are some of the pages and illustrations. So while this product, early Arabic printed books, presents a wide range and extensive printing and heritage of Arabic texts, I just wanted to say a word about the importance of the actual printing and translation of these texts, because manuscripts are always valued more highly than printed books, but printed books are essential for the study of those manuscripts, and also, as I say here, for recording the loss of some Arabic texts. Some Arabic texts only survive in translations into Latin or Hebrew. And also the role of European scholars who were interested in Arabic and sought out texts to study and translate. As you probably well know, many of the early professors of Arabic in European universities had previously or were simultaneously professors of Hebrew. And I think one of the early motives was to learn Arabic to study the history of Judaism. Finally, I just wanted to show you some statistics of the number of works and translations by subject, show you the places of publication or printing, mostly in Cairo, then Paris and Venice. This is just for this module. And then the languages, mostly Arabic, but a lot of Latin, French, and as we have seen, many bilingual. So this module will support Islamic studies, Arabic, Middle East, history of science, history of the Middle East, history of Crusades, history of philosophy. So as well as multiple individual research topics for PhD and beyond. So now perhaps I'll open it up for questions.
Can you show us a little bit more functions of the platform itself?
Of the platform, yes, certainly. So let's look at some of the functionality. To take this basic changes you can make. The interface of the product is currently in English. You can change that to Arabic and one of about 30 something other languages if you so wish. So changes to that in the top right hand corner, as you've just seen, changes all the interface on the home page. For example, going to the advanced search page, you can see all the labeling there is now also in Arabic. This won't change the metadata. Most of the metadata is bilingual in Arabic and English. So let's look at the term frequency tool. You can click on term frequency from the home page to take you through to the term frequency screen. Here you can see you have two search boxes to put in your terms. So you can search on one term, two and doing a comparison, or add rows and do a more complex comparison. You have also the year range, so you can look at the whole date works in the whole corpus as it's with the dates here, or you can limit it to a more to a specific time period. Here it has both content types. There are newspapers and periodicals in the literature module, so they won't appear if you don't have that module. So I'm going to initially tick this monographs here. And I'm going to limit it just to the science module, which you won't need to do this if you just have one module, because that would be already preset. But and below is the screen which the graph will appear. So let's start with putting in two terms. I've chosen the word harp, war, to compare with the word raka, prosperity. So start with the first term. Harp. And now the second term, raka. And I'm going to leave the date range as it is for the moment, and then just click graph. And now you can see that the majority of works are in the 19th century and even towards the latter part of the 19th century, which makes sense if you think about the rise of Arabic, printing in Arabic. There are a few earlier on. You can also see quite evidently that the word harp is far more frequent than the word raka. So to look at this period more, like at the end of 19th century more closely, you can either change the date range at the top, or you can select, sort of click and move your cursor along to select a period, which will just highlight that period. And now you can see more clearly from 1832 through to 1898, which was the bit I highlighted, how the two terms relate, and how there is a huge increase in the term harp from about 1874 through to about 1880. And if you click on the dots, which are the points, date points, you can see how many works are relevant works with your term are printed in that year. And clicking on that will bring those terms into your search box, so you can study those in whichever way you want and search within these results further. If I go back, now we can go back to where we were by clicking Reset Zoom, which will remove that selection that I put in. Now let's move to try on popularity. So click popularity. This hover over explains exactly what this is. The frequency of your search term, which is the number of documents per year, and its popularity, the percentage of total documents each year. So you can see that this gives us a very different graph. Although the numbers here are relatively few. So you would expect if there are hits in the earlier period, they would have a higher percentage because there are fewer books printed in the earlier period. So that completely makes sense. So one of the cautions on looking at this is that the works, these dates are the dates the works printed, but the dates the works were written were usually often several centuries before. So how you can compare popularities of use of term is a little more tricky when you know the works were actually printed before the dates you're looking at. However, to get a more easier and clearer view, if we just looked at newspapers, for example, where they're written, let me just limit this to, say, 1850. Looking at newspapers where each newspaper is printed daily, bi-weekly, monthly, it's much more immediate. I mean, it is the time, the date relates to more or less the time that the work was written. So it gives a more useful picture in that sense. So here you can see that prosperity features not at all until about, how far do we have to go? Up to 1872, where we have three articles which have the word raka in them. Let me actually change back to frequency. Yes, the chart shows us that the term prosperity, raka, was hardly used at all in newspapers through this period. There are a few mentions, 3 articles in 1872, 2 articles in 1873, 1 in 1874, 2 in 1876, etc. But compared with the term harp, war, there are many more, but at certain periods. When it's about 1861, there are 22 documents with that word, going to 88 in 1873 and 126 in 1877. If we click on that, it brings these articles into your research, into your results list, so you can analyze them further. And also see from which periodicals these terms have come. A lot, mostly from Al-Jinan, and then some from Al-Nahla. And then you can proceed with your research from here. We also have essays here on the history of Arabic printing, on the early typeface, which for some reason doesn't seem to want to load at the moment. I'll check that. Oh, here we go. These have links so that you can go straight through to the work there that has been described. This is actually the first text printed in Arabic. So while we're on this text, at the top, when you come to a book, you have the short details of it. Underneath, you have the full citation. And then if you want to cite, there's a citation there. There's a unique document number, which is you can use in a search, which I can show you in a minute. There are related subjects here. These are the Library of Congress subjects. This information in the middle here are notes from Ellis's catalogue on which this collection is based. So that quite often they will supply information which is not obvious in the text itself. So it's usually worth a very helpful context. I've showed you the e-table of contents. You can also search within the work here. We can also search within this text. It's a Christian work, so if I search for Salah, meaning prayer, which is also in the title, we have several hits. Just to show you how it's picked it up. In the chapter headings. So for more functionality, let's go to the advanced search. Just wait for this one. Okay. And then from the advanced search page is probably where I would go first. You have various search indexes on the document title, the publication title. This is if you've got, one of the modules has newspapers and periodicals in, the literature module. So there you would probably want the publication title because the document title will be the title of the article. Place of publication, biographical details, which goes through all the metadata. The entire text, which I used earlier. The Gale document number that's where you would put that unique number. If you save that, you can search there. Searching just front matter, shelf mark, that I find very useful because at the bottom in the full citation, it will give you the British Library shelf mark. So if you're researching in detail several works, that may be the quickest way to actually find the work again. And then Library of Congress subjects, you can search there. as in most databases, you can search by date, limit by date, date range. These are the publication titles. You can select those. I think these are all periodicals. Place of publication. You can select these here. Subjects we looked at earlier and the languages. And then the original languages. Because there's so many translations, you may want to look at, just see which ones have been maybe translated into Arabic, because some of these have, for example, and then illustrated works here. If I do a search, okay. So this again is across all modules, but so there are a very large number of results here. So if you're faced with that many results, if you just want those in Arabic, you can limit to Arabic. You may well want to look at the subjects and, oh, sorry. So just trying to choose one of these which would be in your volume. Let's choose this one. And then you can either limit further, maybe to a place of publication, or choose one work. And if you're searching for a subject and you're not so interested in, the history of printing or particular authors, but what is actually was known and discussed about a particular subject at the time, then you may want to research further within these texts with further terms. Or do you have a follow-up question to that, which I can direct you on functionality?
No, and I don't have anything. I don't have anything in the chat, so I think you're touching on everything. Yeah.
Maybe I
but
can
if there are follow-up questions, please don't be shy to put them in the chat. Julia?
Yeah. Yes.
I have a question. It's about if the search within function, if it's reliable, because sometimes programs don't recognize text correctly. So can you be sure that a word doesn't exist in the book if the search function doesn't find it?
If the search function doesn't find it, it doesn't mean that the word isn't in the book, because with every OCR there can be errors. So it's a software program. I mean, even if it's an English book, it's possible that you can't find it, particularly if it's an old printing. So no, I would never say it's totally infallible. This is
okay. And I have one more question. It's if you can clarify what the abbreviation LOC means.
Carry on.
if you can clarify what the, Library of Congress. Thanks, Moore.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Sorry, I could have thought of that myself. I'm sorry, I should have known these things. I know I should know these things too, but it's like next level for me sometimes.
It's a very good question. We make too many assumptions, but yes. One of the things I did mention when we were looking at the advanced search that you can limit by illustrations. So if you are interested in finding books with illustrations, then you can limit to those illustrations and you'll get all those titles, and then you'll be able to just find your diagrams or more detailed maps of constellations, as I showed you earlier. Anything else I can tell you about, show you?
One question, Julia, please.
Yes, of course.
Can I, you hear me?
Yes, yes, of course. Can you hear me? Yes.
Okay. Yeah. My question is, there are books that start with the table of contents. I mean, this is the first page. There is a way to know the bibliographic details of the books. I mean, not by the citation tools. I mean, to see it printed, something more official.
You mean?
I mean, if I write some essay or some work.
Yes.
So I need to know the details. I mean, I cannot just use the citation tools that you wrote. I need to see it.
You need to see it. You have the details on the title page, the title page.
I saw a few books without the details. This is why I'm asking.
Without a title page, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes. If there isn't a title page, that's because either it's been lost or there wasn't one printed. I mean, certainly in the history of printing, title pages came in sometime in the later 15th century. There were quite a few that weren't printed with title pages. So these.
So if it's not there, it not exist, you're saying?
It's either it didn't exist at all, or the title page has been lost.
I understand.
Those are two. If you can't find, if the book doesn't show a title page, that would be the options. This full citation is details from the MARC record, which was created for this book. So if you don't have a title page, this should be quite good as citation information. Do you not find it sufficient?
I see the citation information. Yeah, okay, this is my question and you answer it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have any questions? I mean, you can also always email me directly or via Moore. I'm sure she would forward on